Good. What you're seeing here is the script that we created in the last lecture. And what this creates is a window with a browse button and a generate KML button, which for now do nothing. But the thing here is that every time we execute the script here, a window is created, but also we are creating a point.kml file because these lines are being executed too. What we want instead is to actually execute these lines when we press the generate KML button. So the first thing we have to do here is to actually wrap these lines inside a function. So let's say def KML function. And here we have to pass two parameters. We need an infile parameter and an outFile parameter. And we can put some default values to these two parameters. So the first will be the input file and the second is the output file. Great. And of course this parameter needs to reflect the input for the read CSV file and for the save method. We have an error here, invalid syntax. Yes, we haven't added the colon. And now to indent all these lines easily, you just go ahead to edit and indent. So we have a function. Now if I delete this file and execute the script, we are just calling the window. So the file is not generated. So instead we want to call this function when the generate KML button is pressed. For that we need to add a command parameter. And that will be equal to the name of the function that we want to execute. That's it. Now execute the script and say generate KML, and we have the points KML file generated. And here are the points. Good. Let's close this now. So that's how to add an action to the generate KML button. What we also want to do is append a function to the browse button as well, so that when the browse button is pressed, the user will be prompted with a dialog window asking the user to specify the CSV file that they want to process. To create such a dialog window, you have to import the askOpenFileName method from tkinter again. So from tkinter.fileDialog import askOpenFileName. So the file name method is a part of the file dialog class of the tkinter library. But before we use the askOpenFileName method, I would like you to see what this actually does. So I'm going to go ahead and run this line in the IPython console. Great. And then I'll create a variable and assign to the variable the askOpenFileName. Execute. And so we have the dialog window. Now if we select a file here and say open, seemingly nothing happened, but if we print out the file path variable, we will get the path of the file that we selected. So what the askOpenFileName is doing is that it's generating a string out of the file that we are specifying in the dialog window. So now we have to make use of that and pass that string to our KML function. So let's go ahead and do just that. And what we want to do now is to actually append the askOpenFileName method to the browse button that we have created. And for that we again have to create a function. So let's say def browse, and here we say infile equals askOpenFileName. And then we want that the browse button returns the file path string. Now we assign the browse function to the command parameter. And let's execute the script now to see what's going on, but I'll delete the KML file first and execute. And so we have two buttons, so let's test the browse button. Good, looks good. And let me specify the file I want to convert to KML. Great, and then press generate button. And we get the points.kml file. Now everything looks beautiful, but it's actually not as beautiful as it looks like. It is true that when we press the generate KML button, the KML function is triggered. However, if you look closely here, you'll see that the KML function is getting the file input from this string. But this is not what we wanted. What we wanted was that the KML function gets the string out of the browse function. So the browse function is the function that generates the file path string. So what we want to change here is that we want to call the browse function inside the KML function. And this way the returned infile value will be passed to the infile parameter here. Good. Let's execute this now. So we got an open dialog window, but we didn't want it to get the dialog window immediately. We wanted to get it after we press the browse button. So why is this happening? The reason is that when Python executes a script, it starts from the first line and all the lines one by one down to the bottom. And when it goes to the functions, it reads the definition of the functions, and then it goes to the KML function, and what it does here is that it executes the browse function. So before triggering the action by pressing the browse button, Python is executing the browse function before we press the browse button. So we need a way that allows us to grab the infile path string from the browse function, but doesn't execute the browse function. So the thing that does the trick here is the global variables. So as I already told you in the lecture about the global variables, we use a global variable when we don't want to execute the function, so we just want to fetch some information inside of that function. In such a case, we don't need the return infile here, but we just want to make the infile variable global variable. And of course, we have to remove the argument here. So what happens now is that when the script is executed, so it reads the definition of the browse function, it reads the definition of the KML function, and it doesn't call any function when it reads this definition. But before we had the browse function being called in the KML function. So let's test this now, and I'll delete the points.kml file, run, and we get the window very nicely. Browse. I'll go to my computer, which for some reason I have renamed to 7, and go to out, coordinates, click generate, and we have the points.kml file generated. Here is our African savanna. Great, so this is how you create graphical interfaces and assign functions to them so that they actually do something. I'll see you in the next lecture then.